Well, it's time to start our final unit of study for our music appreciation class. We're going to start out with music since 1945. So be sure and read in your textbook page 438 through page 464. On page 438, you will read about musical styles since 1945. Especially interesting is the list of 10 new characteristics of music since 1945. Number 1, you have increased use of 12-tone system. You have serialism, which is the use of techniques of the 12-tone system to organize rhythms, dynamics, and tone color. You have chance music, in which the composer chooses pitches, tone colors, and rhythms by random methods, or allows a performer to choose much of the musical material. Number 4 is minimalistic music, characterized by a steady pulse, clear tonality, and insistent repetition of short melodic patterns. Number 5, musical quotation, works containing deliberate quotations from earlier music. Number 6, tonal music and return to tonality by some composers. Thank goodness, right? 7, electronic music. 8, liberation of sound, a greater exploitation of noise-like sounds. 9 is mixed media, and 10 is new concepts of rhythm and form. And so those are some of the things we're going to look at today. Pop culture has had a large influence on everything worldwide, including music. First of all, we have instant communication that has resulted in new styles in fashion, music, and visual art spreading rapidly and then disappearing. So what is popular today may not be popular tomorrow. It may be a total craze today and everyone has it, but within days, no one even remembers it hardly anymore. And so everything is very disposable. Music that you will hear, even in church services, you will hear it used regularly for 2, maybe 3 years, and then you won't even hear it anymore, and you can't even find the music hardly for it. And so that's the way even popular music becomes, and secular music. You'll hear something that is super popular, but then you will hardly be able to find the music again within a number of years. Very few pieces actually do you still hear later on. So the pop culture has instantaneous spread of fashion and music through the internet and through television and through communication through things like Facebook and the social media. But they come and go very quickly. Another change in pop culture that affected music a lot is that since 1945, musical recordings have gone from LP, long play records, to audio tapes, to CDs, to DVDs, to the internet. And so that is a lot of change in a very short period of time and how we listen to music and how music is preserved. Let's look more closely at 4 types of changes that happened in music since 1945. Number 1 is chance music. Some composers were choosing pitches, tone colors, and rhythms by just the toss of a coin or by letting performers choose the order of the pitches or rhythm. So in other words, in the music, there would be 5 random pitches written at the top of the page or in a certain portion of the page, and it would say, you choose which order to play these 5 pitches. Or it could have, play these pitches in this order, but you choose the rhythm. And so there was a lot of choice by the composer, and so each time you heard the piece, it would sound different depending on what the performer decided to do. Next, we have electronic music. So we're electrifying all of our traditional instruments. You'll hear this in almost every rock concert that you go to today. You have electric guitars, an electric bass, electric drums. You can have electric violins and electric pianos, electric keyboards, and they are distorting the sounds electronically. And so you'll see a lot of times they have this foot pedal, and they can add sound effects, and they can bend the sound. And so they're doing all kinds of things with electronic music. They might also use recorded sounds, such as they might want to have birds in the background, a sound of birds, or thunder, or a running river. And so you'll hear these electronic sounds being laid over on top of the music. And so you could hear an orchestra playing with actually a river sound flowing in the background or birds in the background. 3, there's a wide variety of sounds. Singers might scream or laugh or whisper or cough or whistle or groan. You hear this still in a lot of pop music. You'll hear them, laugh or whistle. There's just all kinds of sound effects that they're adding besides just their singing. Also, you might have brass and woodwind players might hum while playing so that they can actually create 2 pitches at the same time. I've heard that before. It's quite unusual sounding. Especially flute players can do a lot of that. So they're humming one pitch and then playing another. So they're kind of doing a duet with themselves. I have actually done with violin, but that's easier to do because your hands are doing one and I could sing while playing the violin. But woodwind players can actually hum while playing, and some brass players as well. Pianists might also pluck the strings inside of the instrument, or they might put wedges inside the instrument to mute some of the strings or roll things around inside of the instrument. And those are prepared pianos, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. So all kinds of new sounds and sound effects that they're putting into the music. There's also a lot of mixed media. Music is often presented together with film, light shows, commercials, PowerPoint slideshows, and so especially the light shows. You're going to go to a concert, and there's going to be a laser light show, and there's going to be spots that will go into the crowd or will go onto the stage, and so it's a light show going on. And if you are watching a commercial, there's going to be music in the background. And again, you have your film and your movies are having music in the background to enhance the action. And so there's a lot of mixed media going on where you might even have a slideshow of just pictures of famous paintings, and there would be music in the background. So all these things are combining together to create a multimedia experience. On page 448, you'll read about John Cage and one of the pieces that he wrote. John Cage was born in 1912 and he died in 1992. He was born in Los Angeles, and he did not start composing until he was 21 years old. And before that time, he'd just been a starving author. So he had been trying to publish books, but he was not being very highly successful enough to be able to support himself financially. So he started writing music. His music was not popular with the public, but when he was 36, he got a job as a college professor of composition. Remember, we talked about how that the universities are now the patrons of music. And so every university needs if you have a music department, you need a composition professor. And so John Cage was hired on as a composition professor when he was 36. When he was 48, his new ideas were suddenly seen as cool to the 1960s intellectual crowd. Remember, we talked about how that fads and things that are popular just kind of come and go really quickly. So he had been doing a lot of the same things, but suddenly he's very popular with the 1960s intellectual crowd. And he began to get commissions to compose, which led him to fame. He continued to compose music that captured the praise of intellectuals until his death. And so we're going to listen to a piece by John Cage. The piece that we're going to listen to that was composed by John Cage was written for a prepared piano. Now this is a picture of what the inside of one prepared piano looks like. Every prepared piano piece is going to look different because the composer will have different notes that they want to sound unusual. And so inside the piano, on the grand piano, you will see nuts and bolts screwed in between strings, or you'll see rubber mallets, probably like erasers of some kind, something plastic or like an eraser that is going to be stuck between the keys to mute the sound You can roll things around inside the piano, but only specific notes. It will tell you before the piece is written. This is specifically, you put this screw in between these two strings, and you put this eraser or wedge in between these two strings, and then it will say, stand up and strum the strings yourself, or roll this around inside the piano. So prepared pianos, I did a prepared piano piece on my senior recital, and it was quite fun. I mean, and who would know if I was playing the right note or the wrong note, right? Because it was just so odd sounding, and this is not a piece that you're just going to hear a lot of performances of. And so I loved playing. I thought it was a lot of fun. And so let's listen to one of these. So on page 448, you read about John Cage's Sonata No. 2 for prepared piano. It's only a 2-minute sonata, and it's in AABB form, and it's characterized by this gradual thickening of texture and increased rhythmic momentum. And inside the piano, you have bolts, screws, door stops, pieces of felt, paper, or plastic inside, and the performer can pluck the strings. And so actually you will see on the video the prepared piano as it is being played. And so, I don't know, it's quite cool and very interesting. Now, if you're going to be playing you're going to hear these at universities, and they will not allow you to do this on their 9-foot concert grand. So when I did this myself, they allowed me to use the 7-foot grand, which was not their most expensive piano. So and I prepared it beforehand. So I played some of my pieces on the 9-foot, and then they rolled out the 7-foot that I had prepared prior to the concert. So, interesting piece. I hope you enjoy it. On page 448 and 449, you'll read about the electronic poem by Barès. It is one of the earliest masterpieces of electronic music created in a tape studio. Edgar Varèse was one of the great innovators of 20th century music, was born in France, and spent most of his life in the United States. And he composed this piece when he was 75 years old. And during the original performance, there were photographs, paintings, and writings that were shown on a screen as the music was heard. And he incorporated electronic sounds and recordings of generators, church bells, sirens, an organ, human voices, and machinery. And so all kinds of different sound effects included in the music. So click on the YouTube video and listen to this piece. The next piece we're going to listen to is Libertango by Piazzolla, and you can read about that on page 453 to 455. And Astor Piazzolla was an Argentinian composer who grew up in New York City after immigrating there with his parents when he was only 4 years old. And Piazzolla fuses traditional tango music with classical and jazz music. And so it's actually quite a popular piece that many artists have performed recently and recorded. And so I think you'll really enjoy it. Piazzolla composed this piece while he was in Rome, and he said it was the Song of Liberty. Now we're going to skip on over to page 459, and we're going to listen to a piece by John Adams, who was born in 1947 and is still alive today. He's an American composer, and he conducted and taught music at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. And he currently works with the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra. On page 460, you will read about A Short Ride in a Fast Machine by John Adams. And it is a 4-minute fanfare that is one of the most widely performed orchestral works by a living American composer. And it is post-minimalist. So it has a driving pulse, a constant repetition, and clear tonality of minimalism. And so it doesn't have this 12-tone complicated stuff that they've had in the past. It's lyrical, expressive melodies, and has a varied orchestral colors. So we're almost we're returning to what you would more hear in the Romantic era, except it is on a very small scale. And again, the minimalist is going for less of the complication and more for the enjoyment of the audience, and not quite so difficult to understand. And so this is a nice piece. And so click on the YouTube link and listen to this one. And you can follow along on page 460. It has a description of what you'll be hearing, the different instruments that you'll hear. On page 461, you'll read about Eric Whitacre, who was born in 1970. He is a composer and conductor primarily of choral music. He was born in Nevada and played the synthesizer in rock bands as a teen, but then as he turned about 18 or 19, he fell in love with Mozart's Requiem when he heard it performed, and he decided he should major in composition, and he went to Juilliard School of Music in New York City, which is one of the most prestigious schools of music and colleges and conservatories of music in the United States. And he wrote this piece, Light and Gold, in 2010, and he got a Grammy for it. And that's what we're going to listen to next. Light and Gold is a brief piece for unaccompanied mixed chorus. In other words, that means there's no piano accompaniment and you have both men and women's voices singing. It has a Latin text about light and the soft singing of angels. And the words come out as light, warm and heavy as pure gold, and the angels sing softly to the newborn baby. And so it's just a lovely song, and I hope you enjoy listening to it. To me, one of the most noticeable things about music since 1945 during this unit of study today is how many different varieties of music there are during this time. There's such a broad range of sounds that we hear in music, in the music that we read about and heard about today on page 348 to 464. I hope you heard some new music that you enjoyed.